So what I'm gonna do today is just to follow the list here. I'm probably not gonna be able to reproduce the same setup that I have on 3GS on the environment, which is just a black background, because Godot works in a different way. So yeah, so like if I put the normal environment there, it's all black, and I can see the graph. So I think I watched some videos, but none of them showed how to like do something like this. So I'm not really sure if it's gonna be possible. And so I'm going to test or just change stuff here to see if it works. The problem is if you do it like this, then it doesn't work there. I'm going to delete this stuff. I'm gonna put the graph. I was able to solve the picker, so I'm gonna show that. The object picker. It's very slow as well. Uh, just kind of weird. You wanna delete the background and put it again? So I'm just trying to find a background that I can use as a standard thing. So I'm gonna create from here, and then I'm gonna write down the stuff that is needed to set things up, and then I'm gonna try to create this from code. So I'm gonna use the task scene that I have there. And the way that I'm thinking about it is creating a function that it receives the root node and then creates the environment and the light. I think you have to do a directional light. Probably gonna use Grok to ask what kind of lights does Godot have? If I can't find, because here you can put the name. So I have to clarify the explanation of all of them. But this is kind of the problem. I think you have to put the directional light and then it works as like a light for the whole scene. So that's probably the way you should do it. And the problem with this one is that if you play, it's just all black. So I'm trying to find something that is as close as possible to the stuff that I had there before. Let's see. So you can see here. Probably gonna, not sure today, probably tomorrow, I'm gonna make a small video explaining how did I, like the finished thing about the picker there, that I changed the standard cameras to implement the dragging of the nodes. And now it's working. So this is probably the class there that creates the environment node. So it's probably this. Shouldn't be that hard to create from code, I think. And the way that I'm doing this is I'm trying to create things from code, and I'm using this function here now. So this is a project. I created the functionality based on the way that they handle modules. So it basically generates a file on build time that is going to go over the directories that exist on the projects here. And the name of the folder has to be the same name as the project that is running from the command line. And then it's gonna run an entry point function that's gonna essentially go here at some point. And then here I'm looping over. So in the beginning I extract all the scenes from the project. So I create the project from the editor, then the project is just basically a scene file. So you can use the project settings class and the dir settings or dir access class to traverse the root of the project directory and get all scenes and then get the root node of the scene. So the scene is a package scene, which represents the file that has the serialized information for the scene. And you can call a function on that package scene that allows you to retrieve the root node of the scene. So it's basically a tree. Each scene is a tree, so I store the root nodes here, along with the path for the scene, and then I'm looping over here. So I'm looping over all of them, and in this case I only have this scene, but if I want to have more scenes, I'm just gonna put the paths of the scenes here. Then for each scene I'm going to, based on the way that I'm trying to design this, I can search entry points. I can create subtrees and then search entry points on the main routes to add the subtrees to the main scene. So this function is the one that I'm calling there now. I was doing other stuff, which I'm probably gonna go back once I'm gonna use this stats layout function, or yeah, the stats layout function just to create the components. Then every time that I create a component, I'm gonna put inside of a function, and then I'm probably gonna put on the root of the project. Maybe I'll have to create a, maybe I should create a different folder here, and then like maybe I think I'm gonna start a file, and if you guess a lot, so then I create another one. I think that's the idea. So for something that like the environment, I think it's better to probably create a function, and then so maybe let me do environments CP. And I did other live streams explaining all of this stuff, how I did this. But it's basically inside of the editor, and it allows me to build the scene from the command line. So I just run as if I was running a project, and then it's just gonna run the code that I have there instead of running the. It runs the iteration for one time, and then it executes the entry point function that I have there, and then it exits the main loop. So it allows me to. I built just the beginning of the scenes, but that's the idea. Is like build on top of the. Every time I want to build something, either it's going to be a composition, which is a function that you take multiple nodes and put them together, or it's going to be a class that encapsulates the functionality. And that's which one to choose depends on the variance of the data, I think. So for something like this, it's probably better to create several different functions. So I'm going to have one function that is going to be the entry points for, not the entry points, I'm going to have one function that is the standard, like the default environment that I use, which I'm also using, creating layouts. So, and then based on the configurations that I do there over time, I can choose other stuff to use as the default environment, and then I can basically pick from this file here which one to start with, and then it allows me to compose the scene. And the stuff you were doing is amazing. I can't say for the coding journey, bro. Yo, man, thank you very much for the message. I'm gonna copy the way that I'm doing the other ones. Yeah, I'm including from the roots because I think is like the relative path. I think it depends on the SC subfiles, which is the build system that Godot uses. Godot uses scones, so it runs the main file is as construct, I think, on the root of the project, and then you can call a function inside of that file to call other SC subs to help you build everything. So I think that depending on the way that you structure the SC subs, it allows you to put different relative paths, and then scons is gonna be able to figure out based on the structure of SC subs how to create the final command that is gonna create the whole thing. And based on the way that I'm doing here, the downside is that I'm incorporating the code as part of the engine, so it's statically linked. So it builds everything as part of the engine. And I didn't take the time to change and make it as a library because it was just easier to incorporate as part of the editor, the code that I'm building. So there's a chance that it's slower, but if you want to avoid that, you can use the GD extensions, which is basically the same logic, but is dynamically linking the code. I think I should probably, so I'm going to return a node. So this is called for declare, which is just you specify the type on the header file and then you put the include path on the C++ file, because on C++ the way that it works is you have a linker. So the linker solves the dependencies. And first, before it does that, it creates the object files. And the object files are translation units, which is basically a C++ file with all the header dependencies that it has. So the issue with including on the headers is that if these guardrails here are to stop including the same header twice, but they only work on the same translation unit, which means that on the same C++ files. So what happens is if you define functions, if you define things on the header file, then increases the probability that the linker is going to find a conflict, because when it generates the object file, it doesn't have a conflict. But because the linker is not aware of the multiple dependencies across the different C++ files, then when the linker tries to link them, it's going to find multiple definitions. The guardrails don't stop the different translation units from including the thing multiple times. But on scones, I think it's kind of different, because a lot of the times I did stuff, I think I had to do it, like to include the header file on the, to include another header file on some header file, because usually when you create a class, you need to include, you can forward declare, because the compiler, it's not enough to forward declare for the compiler to resolve the macro you have to use, which is usually the class macro, to register the class from class DB. So you end up having to include the same headers a lot of times. So what I guess happens is that probably something under the hood on scones is gonna resolve this, but I think it's better to try to avoid if you can. So yeah, the other thing I'm gonna part here is gonna be this. I'm gonna close the center camera now and the nodes. See pretty. So this is the macro you have to use to register the class on class DB. Class DB is a class from Godot that allows you to register the classes. It's basically, there's two main classes on Godot. One is going to be the class DB that manages the types. So all types you want the editor to have access to, and the engine for serialization, also for the script. You have to register them with class DB. Class DB is the main class that does that and uses a global object to do that. And then you have the object DB, which uses another global object, which is object slots, to keep track of the memory for each object. And it does that. They do it based on the memory pool by using a kernel library. Godot roads here. Yeah, so I think that's based on the tutorials, you do this. Then when you click here, so after you set, when you click here, this is the values of the environment there. So this, I also spent a bunch of time looking to this inspector here. And the way that it works is on the inspector class. I think it's on, the inspector doc is the main one. Then there's a member of the inspector doc that is another class that is going to be the one that is responsible for building this. And the function that does that is called update underscore tree. And the function is going to create the elements based on the the properties of the class. So they have standard functions. They have a main function which is going to have a switch statement, and then for each type of the properties, is going to select different. Is going to select other classes that they created. The base class is going to be editor property, which all the other ones inherit from, and so the main one that I remember is editor spin slider, which is the one that I translated for me to use on the stuff that I build there, which is just the slider that shows up on some of the values. And then they have one that is called object, and the object is the one that allows you to do this. So basically everything you can do here is going to be properties that are subscribed with the add property macro on the class. And then you put setters and getters, and that's how you are able to change the values here. So when you click on the environment, you're changing the actual ref environment for the class. So I assume that the way you do this is going to be to instantiate the environment here. So the ref is a class that helps them keep track of the. I think it's like makes garbage collection easier. So it's their implementation of garbage collection, the ref, and it stands for reference, I think. So it's just a class that allows you. It makes it easier to manage memory because it basically does things for you. And there's a templated class, so the type it puts inside of here is going to be the one that the ref keeps a pointer of. So in order to call the constructor of the class, you call instantiate on the ref. And this function is going to call the constructor of whatever type you initialize the ref with, as far as I remember. Yeah, so it calls the constructor here, and then it creates a reference on the thing. But obviously, I'm not really sure if that's the correct way to do this, because I never did anything with this class. So what I'm going to see, so based on the tutorials, usually people put sky here, and then, which was what I was doing, is the problem with the black background. And then they set up something else. I think they put procedural here on the sky. So you select sky for the background, so set background mode. So in the environment, probably they have this set background mode. Oh, this is a problem actually. I'm gonna have to change the name, because it's the same name. It's kind of confusing. So let me think about a different name. This one is environments, the other one is environment, so I think it's too similar. And maybe headless environments. I think I'm just gonna put I'm gonna put headless environments just to make it more, or maybe HD, so it's not too long. So HD environments. In resources environments. Oh, I forgot to do the Anki. I'm gonna do just a couple of Anki cards, because I forgot to do it today. I'm trying to remind myself to do it every time that in the beginning of the day, but a lot of the times I forget. I'm not the way that I look at this is just like a simple thing you can do. So like I don't take it very seriously. I don't remember if this is who am I or something else. Who am I? So the consistency is more important for this stuff, and also like I think that the best way to do Enki is probably if you build your own cards, but then it takes too much time. So I think that's fine for now. So basically, you can get the cards from get shards that they put here. So if you click here, you can download the cards that people made. And the problem with this is that a lot of times it's not for very useful things. It's more like generic. So, but I think it's better than starting out not knowing anything. So it increases your baseline. So it makes it easier to search for or learn other stuff. I don't remember if this is no. I think it's this one. Don't remember. Yeah. I don't remember this one very well as well. Is K. I think that's enough. I don't remember this. It's kind of fun. Let me think. Yeah, so background modes is the thing. Yeah, so it's probably this function here, set background, and then put this mode. Yeah, the sky. You're just gonna copy the functions and then just do everything there. In the beginning, the problem is that I'm not really sure if I'm gonna use this stuff. Because like I don't really care about the background that much. I just want something. The problem is that obviously it makes sense for them to do the stuff the way that they did because Godot is more for developing games. So it's not really what I'm trying to do. So obviously it makes sense to have like a lot more option for the backgrounds and to allow to create like environments and stuff like that. But I think for the actual stuff that I'm trying to do, which is just visualize graphs, it's just a lot better if you just have a black background, very simple, so that you don't get confused. So it is kind of annoying. This might be okay. So when you put sky there, have this. I think you create this new sky, and then it allows you to do some other stuff. So this is the one that I was thinking, that I was looking. Maybe before I do look into this one, I should probably look into the directional light. That's probably the way to do it. So I'm gonna ask Grok to explain an explanation of the types of lights that exist there. And then the thing that is also very complex is that depending on the type of material you have and the way you set up the materials, the light's gonna be different and the environment's gonna be different. So like there's a lot of customization you can do. So I think before what I did was put this one and then I can set here. So the top color is the one that shows up there and the horizon is obviously there. Let me see what happens if I put a black. On this. Oh, there's also some. So this is the problem that I'm talking about. So it's like very bad true. And if I put a very bright light or a different environment, it doesn't look very good. And so I can see now that I was able to do it. It's basically just I realized that the thing that I was doing wrong is just the getting the I shouldn't put the z distance as the distance of the object. It's just the distance from the camera to the object because the ray is being projected from the camera. So I'm gonna go back and then see what happens if I put a directional light. So I think it's there. Do you remember that there was a way to change the angle that the light was on, but I don't know how to do this. How can I see the light? Maybe see what it looks like on the thing. Yeah. Oh, so now, huh? So maybe that's what I want. Yeah, but it's still a problem because it has an angle and the arrow is fucked up. The ideal situation would be to have, actually, I don't want any lights. Oh. It's also weird that the arrow is doing this. Because the arrow is supposed to. So I should probably. The arrow is gonna be annoying actually. It might be. I might have to change everything. Because the issue is that the way that I'm generating the arrow is by using an array mesh. So it procedurally generates the arrow. Because whenever you have a geometry that you need to change every frame, the geom when you have a dynamic geometry, you need to generate the geometry with the array mesh or any other type of mesh generation that is not static, obviously. So, and these classes that Godot has is just like an abstraction on top of the shaders. So you're basically just building the buffers, the vectors that are going to be used on the buffers, and then you use the class as an abstraction to manually draw to the shaders. So there's something weird with the array mesh that for some reason you can't set the color on the buffer. If I tried to do that and it didn't work, so the way that I was setting is based on the geometry, I think, or some other property of the thing. And it looks like it's messing up the color here because I'm pretty sure that the way that I did there is it has a color. This is obviously just to test things. So, but I do remember I think that I put a color there. But maybe not. Maybe it's black. So the question is, I'm gonna ask ChatGPT. So what is how can I change? Yo, thank you. So it's telling me to use the stuff here. I thought that it was gonna be hmm. I thought it was gonna be like the sky where it's like on the horizon of the thing. I guess it depends on the thing. So probably let's try this Omni light. Light. Probably the font's better. So this one, yeah. So the arrow is supposed to have a color, but I guess the nodes don't have a color, or they are black. Because I do remember that in some situations, I don't know for sure what happened. I don't know if I set the value the wrong way, but I think like think when you don't set a material or something like that, then the node becomes black, or some weird circumstance that the node becomes black. So whenever the node doesn't have a color, it becomes black on some certain scenes when you don't set the color. But I think that the way that I'm doing there now is based on the range. So it's basically here. So the position I do this, I randomize the initial positions, and then the color I'm just doing this. So with the eye. So in the beginning it's very close to 0. At the beginning it's gonna be 0, and then the other one's very close. So it's probably because of this that is black, because black is 0, 0, 0. But the edge I don't remember, but I'm pretty sure that I'm setting the color. Yeah, edge color. So it's basically the same stuff. I'm just initializing there. I'm just setting an arbitrary color here. But on the edge itself, I think I'm setting in a different way. I'm not using the buffer. I'm using a set surface override material. So I guess this function is still using on the array mesh. So it doesn't use, I'm not setting on the geometry, which I think is better. But it would be better if you could set on the thing, but I think it's obviously fine, I think, as well. Just set like this. So it's setting on the mesh instance with the, or maybe this is wrong. I think it is setting. So the class that creates the curve is not the one that sets the color. So I'm wrapping the graph edge 3D is the one that inherits from mesh instance 3D, and then I created the other class, which is this one that creates the curve. This one is the array mesh one. Array mesh. So yeah, the color is independent from the curve. Everything's fine. It doesn't show anything. Mm. This is kind of the problem because the editor is different. If I put clear color, mm, this, Probably the custom color and finding a line is probably the best way to do it, or the simplest way to do it for the default. I just have to find a way to, because I want to avoid having to put multiple different lines, because more stuff to build the scene, and also there's more chance that depending on the position, it doesn't align the nodes properly, which is not very good. Yo, what's up? Yes, interesting. So maybe this one works. And that's basically what I wanted actually. The only problem is the black ones, but then obviously I can just set nose with a different color. 'Cause there's not much you can do if the nose is black and the background is black. So I think I'm gonna use this one. I'm gonna change the color on the initial nodes. Probably like 0.5 or something like that. I'm gonna write down the. Hey, what's up? So I think it's pretty much just find the functions and then just set everything that I have there. Then after I do that, I'm going to compile again. But I think I'm going to compile. I'm going to compile and then just test again on the same thing because I changed the color there. But I'm pretty sure it's going to work because as long as I don't use black for the nodes or the labels, then it's going to show. And I think that's exactly what I wanted there. So it's the simplest way possible. And I'm not going to think too much about this now. So I'm just going to have this. I'm actually pretty happy that I was able to find this because I was thinking that it probably wouldn't be possible to do the exact same thing, but it looks like this one is good enough. The only downside of this is that I think that it probably has a range that if the node goes too far, then it probably stops working. But like there's probably shadow, but I think it doesn't matter that much. I should probably test that actually. So I can put the physics thing there, the physics component, and then change the values to see, to put the nodes far away and then follow the nodes to see if it's gonna do. But I think, yeah, it's probably not that big of a deal. So yeah, I'm gonna just see if it works on the editor after, and then after I do that, I'm gonna try to build it from codes and see if it works on the function. Then if it works from the function, I'm gonna try to incorporate the function on the other thing that I was building. So and there's other stuff that I have to do there probably. So I'm gonna build another function. So basically the way that it works on Godot is if you have a thing that you have GUI elements. So basically it's the same as the editor here. So the editor is basically, the root of the editor is gonna be a node class, and the editor itself is mainly based on control nodes, and control nodes are GUI nodes. So if you want to put 3D environment inside of a control node, you have to use this hierarchy here. So this part I'm not really sure how I'm gonna do it, but I think probably it's gonna be the same thing. You just put this inside of a function because obviously I don't wanna call every time. But the thing that is, so the thing that I have to think about a lot is related to the doc system. So based on the way that I'm doing things, I'm thinking about, I'm going to create layouts, which are the initial phases of things. And then each layout is going to have endpoints, let's say, which are the lips of the layouts, which are the places where I'm going to put the components that are different on each thing. So at the beginning, I was trying to make dynamic layouts, and I found a GitHub repo that has it's kind of like what I was trying to do, but they use GDScript, so it's not very good. And I was trying to convert to C++, but it was taking too much time, so I don't think I'm gonna use this. It's very nice what they did, and it was something similar that I was trying to do. It's basically this stuff here. So it allows you to build layouts, and the way that it works, the division is based on a split container class. So the split container on Godot allows you to have resizable containers, and then usually what you do, I think on this case they are putting control nodes, but or rect control nodes and rectangle or rect nodes or rect color nodes to show the layout. But in my case, I think that I'm probably going to use panels for the entry points. And the way that I'm thinking about doing things is for each entry point, let's say, for each final point of the layout, there's going to be a special name that I assign for the docs. And then I'm going to be able to create subtrees to add to the layout from the other function by accessing the name. So the main function is the one that I create the layout in the beginning. And then, but the downside of this obviously is that for each layout you do, I'm gonna have to remember the names for each one. So I'm not really sure if that's a very good approach. So, but the other thing, I'm probably gonna do this as well. But I think either way, if I do it, so like the other thing I have to do is a doc system, which they have on the editor as well. they use, I think, on the editor doc manager, they have another class that is going to be the one that is responsible for creating this element here. So when you when you right click on one of these docs here, so the way that it works is that the docs on the editor are based on tab containers. Tab containers is the class that allows you to have these different tabs here. So each one of these parts is a doc, and they have a class that manages the doc, which is the one that I was showing there, and then they have another class which manages the context for the docs, and then it uses the tab system to allow you to allow you to change the docs on the editor. So if you click on the rectangles, it changes the places of the docs. And I was thinking about creating something similar as well, like making a component to do this, and then just trying to copy as much as possible from their doc context. But I think either way, even if I do that, like I'm gonna have to, because the issue with this is the way that they did it is only useful, is not flexible enough for like a generic situation, is only useful for the editor. And the way that I'm thinking about doing is like a generic layouts, or like each layout is gonna be different, but then the system of docs should be one that works for any layout. That would be the ideal situation thing. So I think it has to be based on the names of the nodes, because each scene is gonna have different. Because the problem is like if you, and this is one of the things that I found confusing when I was trying to study the editor nodes, that the names that they use for the docs, they make sense, but it gets very confusing when you have a bunch of docs. So they use basically left and right, and then on left and right, because you have more subdivisions, you have to use other more specific descriptions. So this is kind of the problem. Is like to see, when you see the layouts is easy to understand, but like to figure out the names of the positions for each one, to be able to remember when you're doing the code where to put the components, then it's kind of harder. So I'm not really sure if the best approach is to create generic names and then just make based on an index, for example. So like I start from left to right. So in this case it would be like 1 or 0 here, then 1 would be this main doc, then 2 here, then 3, then 4 in the bottom. But the problem with this is that it becomes harder to think about when you're coding. So for the icon class that I created, I'm using a specific name that I have there, and I'm doing the functionality based on another name that you're supposed to have. If you have a folder inside of the root of your project that has a specific name, inside of the folder you can put icon files that have a name, and then it allows you to change the contents of a doc that is supposed to have a specific name based on the icon name. So the icon name is the same name as of the component that is gonna change on the doc. So basically this component here, icon sidebar. So the other thing that so let me see if I put this as a child of the thing. I think it should probably be a child of the environment, so that is coupled together. Maybe it's better to create I think probably it's better composition actually. It's not better to. Yeah, because unless it's possible to create a class, maybe I should create a class and then I have different functions. I think the nice thing about having a class instead of creating the environment from functions is that it's going to become easier to switch from different environments. So I could have an environment context class, for example, and then I have this environment as the default, and then as I try to incorporate other environments, I can just add functionality to the class, and then just change the state of the environment based on the state of the class. I think that's an interesting idea. So the way that I'm thinking about this is that there is this relationship between object-oriented programming and composition, and it's basically a gradient like everything else. And the way that I think about it is that object-oriented programming is more solid and rigid, and composition is more flexible. So the higher the variance of the data, the more incentivized you are to have composition, which is basically creating things with functions. And the more static things are, the more incentivized you are to have classes. So what it comes down to, I think, is like how much variance there is from the way you structure environments, and I think it's probably not that much because you're probably always going to use the world environment node. But the question is like, is it necessary to have? Yeah, I guess I could like couple all of these nodes together. Maybe it is better to have a class actually. Then it becomes easier. Hmm. Pretty sure the icon sidebar I did on the module that I have there. This is another question. Every time you create a class, you need to add it on the modules. You need to register the class on the class DB. And then I think that if you don't do it as part of a module, then it's kind of annoying to find, but you can use the functions that they use for registering other classes as well, which is basically register and then the name of what module is, and then types, I think. So register car types would be the file where they register the car types, as it says, and register sync types is the file that they register the sync types. So use a macro basically. So you have to obviously declare and define the class somewhere on the source code of the engine and the editor, and then you find this pattern here, this file. So it starts with register, and then in the middle is going to be the level you want the class to be part of, which in this case would be probably sync. And then you put just put somewhere here where you think it makes sense. So this is one way. So I could create the class on this place here, and then register on this file, or I could make it as part of the module that I have there, which I'm putting the other classes, and then just use the module. I think it's not that much difference because obviously from the standpoint of the application or game you're building, it doesn't make much difference. Because obviously, like, this is just for building the things. So it's more. So I think it probably makes more sense to put this on the module that I have there. And the more I think, the more I think it probably makes more sense to make it a class. Because the thing is, so it feels kind of redundant if there's only the environments, because then obviously you just use the environment and set the things on the environment, then it makes more sense to have composition because change the state of the environment from the function. But I think since you have multiple different lines, like it kind of makes sense to have a class that couples everything together. So I could like make the constructor of the class initialize the things in the way that I'm doing there. The other thing, the other nice thing about creating a class is that you don't have to call the function past the root of the thing and stuff like that. Just more. I'm gonna create the class. I think is better. So what I'm gonna do is just create. I'm not gonna put anything on the class, and maybe in the future I change. But in the beginning, it's just gonna be what I'm doing there now. Maybe it's better to first try to build from the function. Then if I see if it works, I put this functionality on the constructor of the class, and then I just initialize the class. And then later on, if I want to expand, I allow to put other different types of lighting, and basically change like have a generic environment manager. So based on whatever I want to do, I create different functions that changes the properties of the class, and by changing the properties of the class, it changes the environment. I'm gonna do the way that I'm doing now first. Then if it works, I'm gonna think about this. Because the thing is, I'm not 100% sure if that makes sense or not. White's probably all one. I can't see there on the thing. I think it shows up on packs here and RGB here, so I'm not really sure. So it's probably all one. So I think the way you sat there is based on the raw. It's gonna be all one for the reds. So now what I have to do. So I have to first add as a child or sing roots. Then I have to create the mm, I have to create the Omni lines and add as a child of the environment. So sense the environment. The environment. See again. I think I should be this one. Sorry, slides. I'm just checking, just if anything, if everything is set the way that's supposed to be. Okay. So, zero. Maybe it doesn't matter that much. It's probably better to have more higher. I think I'm gonna put 16. So now, yeah, Omni light. That's Omni range. It's probably on the derived classes that this happen. Omni range. Mm. So I assume that you should probably use that generic and then like the generic function that passes the parameter you want to change and then you use that. Oh, so yeah, it has to be actually this represents the class hierarchy. So this means that these properties here are on the actual OmniLine 3D. They're supposed to be on the OmniLine 3D. But maybe it's different because there could be some other stuff going on. But the other properties here are supposed to be from the Light 3D class. So the range should be on the OmniLine 3D. I think the only ones that I changed were the color and the energy on the lights. Attenuation. And maybe attenuation doesn't change anything. I think the attenuation doesn't matter, so I'm not gonna set Obviously, I want this the simplest thing possible to do. So what is for the range? This is weird. I assume that it has to be the parameter functioner. It might be because of this stuff here. Cast. I've seen some similar macros on the variant related functionality. Yeah, so like the name says here, it has to be from the variant. Well, basically, the variant functionality has a bunch of macros that they use to translate or to do the whole functionality for allowing signals and allowing translating different types across the engine functionality and the editor functionality. Is both for serialization of classes and also for emitting signals and other stuff like that. And this might be very annoying to figure out. So I guess it only goes up to here. And the thing is that it is, I think just subscribing the enum to the as a variant. The weird thing is that it's supposed to change here. It's supposed to be possible to change the properties. So maybe I have to see on the bind methods. I think that's the easiest way. The bind methods is the function that usually you're gonna, I think always, you register the classes on, register the functions that the class has on the class DB. We're calling this bind method. And you register the properties and signals and other stuff like that. So these are the, so it should be set parameters. So basically the way that it works is that you put the name of the property here. So this macro here is the one, I think this is the one that is used most of the time. This one is probably a slightly different one. But this macro allows you to register the property on the class on the class DB, which is the thing that allows you to set on the editor there. So whenever you change the values of the property, it's going to call the setters and getters you put here. And it finds by name because it caches the function. It caches the function function pointer of the class using the class DB. So when you call this function here, is gonna cache this pointer here on method bind class, which is a class that class DB uses to keep track of the functions from the class. And the way that it caches is based on the name of the function. So based on this name, it uses this name here, the string name, to find on the map on the method bind the pointer to the function, and then uses method bind to call the function from that pointer. So from the pointer the method bind stored is gonna call the function based on the name here because it maps the functions based on the name. So whatever name you use on class DB to bind the method, you have to put the same name here to call the function, or for the editor and for the engine to be able to call the setters and getters for the properties to change the value. So I think that what is happening there is kind of confusing, but like this function is the one that I saw there, which I thought that is the one that is probably responsible for allowing you to change the values. But the reason why it's showing up on the Omni Light 3D here, even though it's from the Light 3D class, is that they registered the property on the Omni Light 3D, so it shows on a different place on the editor. I'm not really sure why they did it like this, but obviously there's probably a reason for this. I'm not gonna look into the differences here, but I guess I can just look here. And so the main difference is that this accepts an index and the other one doesn't. But it's gonna be the same thing. So this accepts this. Well, I think it's the index of the index of the enum probably. That's why they use the other macro. So it's probably gonna be this function here from the light 3D. Yeah. So I have to use this function and then you pass the parameter and the value. So the parameter is gonna be, so I'm just gonna call there. And then you access the parameter from that thing. There's light 3D and and range. And the other one is the value. So 4096. So this should work, just add the range. So now the energy, I have to see if it's the same. And it's probably the same function. Yeah, I think you always use the param there. See. Energy is the first one. I think the reason why they did it like this, and they, yeah, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. It's probably just to make it easier to visually see what's going on. Yeah, or probably, I think it's probably because the light 3D, but it would be weird for the light 3D to not have range if they, or maybe it's just to avoid creating a whole different enum to set only the range. So it's just easier to set everything on the base class as the enum, and then to not make it confusing, they probably register on the other one to make it easier or to make it more organized to see differences. I assume that's probably the reason why I did it like this. So I think the only value that I'm setting is the energy on the light 3D. It's gonna be 16. It's probably this one. From energy 16. And then you add as a child of the roads environments. Lights. And then you return roads environments. And maybe I should put this type here instead. I think that makes more sense. So for now, I'm gonna try to do it like this. So the way that I'm doing is I'm gonna include this on the file that I have there. Let me see. I'm pretty sure that so the project that I'm creating as a task from code is different than this one. So this one I'm just gonna save the state in case I made a mistake there. Then I can go back to this one and see. I'm gonna open Godot again, just see if that's the case. I'm pretty sure I got everything there. So initialize the world environment and initialize the environment that the world environment is going to use. Then call the constructor, set the background to color, set the ambient source to color, then set to the color to white, set the energy to 16, set the environment on the world environment, then add as a child of the scene roots. Then create the light, change the range and the energy, then add as a child of the environment and return the environment. Actually, maybe I don't need to return anything, actually. Yeah, so I'm not going to return anything because the whole point is to add the world environment to the scene. So, but I think, like I said before, I'm just going to, I'm doing this to test, and I'm probably gonna create a class for this because later on, the way that I'm thinking now is probably because I don't want to think about because I don't know for sure what I'm gonna do. So the way that I'm thinking about it is structuring everything so I can build several different things and then compose everything from other stuff because basically everything is the same thing. The boundaries are a reflection of the computation of the market economy. So every application is the same application, and the boundary between applications is just a reflection of the computation of the collective consciousness because the user interface is a reflection of how we see reality. So if I create everything in the way that I'm thinking about creating, I can reuse things and basically do composition between the classes that I create to create different things that I can compose on different ways to create different state machines that are going to represent different applications. And the boundary is going to be a reflection of the market economy. So the way that I'm thinking about it is I think it makes more sense to create like a very simple default environment in the beginning that I can use so I don't have to think about this. But then probably what is going to happen is that for each thing, the environment is going to change, and then it's probably better to allow to change the environment based on the state of the scene. So I think it makes sense to create a class for the environment and then keep the variance of the logic in the encapsulated in the class of the environment. So because the main things that are going to change is just basically the light, and the road environment is always going to be the class that I use there. I'm going to ask Grok to see if there are other classes. I can obviously, I'm going to open the other project from Godot, but I'm going to ask the So I wanna see because the way that I'm thinking about it, the main thing that you always use the world environment, and then the main thing that changes is the lights and the state of the world environment. And because it is kind of annoying to, but I guess if we encapsulate it on function, it's basically the same thing. So then we don't have to think about it anymore. But just intuitively, I think it makes more sense to make it a class, even though it seems very kind of redundant, because it feels more compact and you can put the variance of the data as part of the class. Hmm. I think this is the one that I have there as Leon's from call. That's why world environments is indeed the primary node used for setting up the global environments. Seeing there are several other nodes and methods you can use to create influence our environment. Separated from world environments when you add. The thing that makes me unsure is that like the world environment class is already supposed to be this kind of class that manages the state. Like the thing that I find it annoying is having to keep track of the hierarchy So basically, like composition is more complex, I think, to build because there's more space for having logic that is not very accurate because the order of in which you add the nodes might change the functionality. So I think that's the case, for example, on the pop-up menu. So depending which order you add a child for the main menu, which I think is menu bar or something like that, is going to change the order in which the nodes show up. So for example, here, I think it's a menu bar, and then you add pop-up menus as children of the menu bar. And then depending on which order you add them is going to be the order that is displayed here. So because of that, I think it makes it like more points of failure if you're building like several different scenes from different instances. Because it makes more sense. Like if you encapsulate on a class, then it's like more, you have a higher confidence that you're always gonna get the same order. So like I'm wondering if it's worth to do another class because of this, because of the lines. It feels kind of loose to have to add the lines separately from the world environment. But I'm not really sure if it's worth it to create a class just for this. Because then like the concern that I have is that it's like the boundary. Like the reason why you have to use functions, I think at some point, is that because of the variance of the data. So if you have too much variance, then it doesn't make sense to create a specific class for each thing. Obviously, because we're gonna spend too much time like creating a bunch more code just to change like specific things. And at that point, it makes more sense to either do composition from outside or to change the class itself. So that's basically the main question, is like how to define the boundary between the two. At what point does it make sense to put the stuff inside of another class instead of, and I think it comes down to how the environment's gonna be used on several different things. That's kind of the issue. I'm gonna test the way that I have there, and I'm going to put it as a class because I'm just gonna go with my intuition. I think that it makes more sense just for, and the class is only gonna have the word. It's gonna have the code that I have there, and I'm gonna make member variables of the stuff that I have there, the lights. But I'm gonna start with that default one, and then if I want in the future, I test on the editor, and then I change the functionality of the class and the state of the class, depending on what I want to do. So like for each environment that I create that is new, that I want to do something new, I just change the state of the class to represent that. Yeah. So the thing is basically saying is mainly the world environment. Yeah, so now what I have to do is put this function on the task layout, I think. Close this stuff. Yeah, so pretty sure that I was using this function here. Let me- So this is the main function that I'm calling here. And then this one, I call this one from here. So this creates the root node for now. And then I use this HD manager, which is the class that I created for managing the creation of the scenes. So I have the sync, I pass the sync path, and then this pattern here indicates that I'm gonna add the subroot that I'm creating here to the root of the sync. And based on the way that I did things, oh, this is something that I have to think about as well. Maybe I should write there. To just remember is that the way that I'm doing stuff, it doesn't work for the signals. So if the node already exists on the tree, I'm updating the node's properties, but the signal is not a property. So I have to see if it's like, how can I check to see if signals were updated? Not really sure if that's. I'm gonna put here at the end, and then I'll think about it later. Yeah. So I use this thing here to map the sync path with the subtrees that are going to be added to the root of the sync. So basically, if I don't want to push to the this is going to be based on the name, so I create this pattern based on the other functions there to allow me to add subtrees to the roots. But if I don't want to add the subtree to the roots, then I just put the name of whatever node that is part of the scene that I want to add. And then it's going to add the subtree from that endpoint. So I'm thinking about creating standard names for the layouts. And then like for the entry points of the layouts, I'm going to have like specific names. And then I'm going to pass the specific name of the point. And that allows me to compose the sync tree based on different subtrees. But I think that for the most part, probably the most likely way that is going to go down is that the layouts are the generic thing, and so I have main layouts, and then for each layout, the complexity is going to be encapsulated inside of the class. So realistically, I think most of the time, I'm just probably going to add everything to the root, and I'm going to do the code outside. So I'm going to do it from the project. I'm going to find the node names that are the layout endpoints instead of the function here. And then based on them, I'm going to add a custom class that is going to be responsible for that part of the layout. And then the complexity is going to be inside of the class, I think. So what I have to do here is include the environments. And I call this function and pass the GUI base. So if I did everything correctly, it should add the environment to the base. I forgot what I'm doing this one. And this one was the one that was putting the slider. So should probably I think not for here. I got it wrong. I'm not really sure why it's not showing here. I'm gonna try to compile like this, see what happens. So I think that this should create the like the scene with the with the graph 3D, and then create the environment based on this stuff there, and it's gonna create this other stuff. And the problem with this is that I'm creating on the GUI. And this one I was trying to I wasn't reproducing. It's just to test the signal connection here. The signal persists. So the thing is, I'm probably not. I'm not able to. The problem is that I'm not gonna be able to add the graph on the GUI base. Hmm. So I think I'm gonna create another. The easiest thing to do is just put no 3D here. So now it should work, I think. So I'm putting the GUI base on the Node 3D, and then I'm putting the graph 3D as child. So this should probably be Node 3D. And I put the environments on the Node 3D. Request environments, blah blah blah. Scene routes. So if this works, it's supposed to create the scene with these nodes and then create the world environments. So I'm gonna see if the world environment works there. I think I'm gonna do off stream. I'm going to think about whether or not to. I'm probably gonna create another class and just put the functionality on the constructor of the class. This functionality here, and then I'm just gonna use the class. And in the future, I might add more stuff to the class or create different environments, and then just think about how to change the state of the class to be able to have different kinds of environments. I think one thing that I could do obviously is put an enum inside of the class, and then have standard environments that I create for different things. I think that would be very cool, and then make the functionality based on the enum. So it probably does make sense to put everything, because then it also makes it a lot easier to change from environments. So if I have a bunch of functions, I have to create other functionality outside, and I think gets through all over the place. So it's probably better to just probably better to put on a class. If this works, I'm going to go start studying I'm gonna do this stuff off stream to convert into a class. I'm gonna remove this stuff from here. And the next step that I'm trying to do is to, on the editor, when you change the size of the split container, the contents of the file system, they shrink, and then there's 3 dots that show up there. On the scene doc as well. So I'm trying to figure out how they do this for dynamically changing the content of the thing, because on the icon sidebar thing that I'm trying to create is basically the same or similar functionality from VS Code, where I have like a tab with icons, and then depending on which kind of icon you click, it's gonna show something different here. So initially, I'm trying to do a file system because I'm trying to create the IDE. That's gonna allow me to visualize code with simulations. So the way that I'm trying to do this is based on this command here. So this basically executes Godot on the path with the path of the project. So the name of the folder has to be the same name of the project, and it's gonna run the interpoint function there. Actually, I just realized I created on the wrong one. No, actually, this is correct, I think. Because I'm calling this function from this, which is on the layouts from code project. Yeah, so it's gonna. So I'm just doing this should task. No, but I think on the other projects I'm gonna do it like this as well. So like create the layouts on this folder here. Then I use the layouts on different projects. And the functions from the project is gonna be mainly composing the docs. And now that I think about it, maybe there's a better way. Hmm. What I'm thinking about is that it's probably because we have three main components. You have the layouts, then you have the classes, layouts, classes, and environment. No, layout classes and doc manager, I think. So those are the things that change from situation to situation. Well, this shows up some other parts, but I think. Let me think about this. So this usually shows up when you are not deleting memory at some point. So what is going on? Oh, I forgot to. I know what I did wrong. So I create another function. So I have to use add child external and not add child. Yeah, this function here, because of the way that I'm creating the functions there. So if I don't use if I use add child, then it adds the nodes that are created from subnodes twice. So I basically changed the node class. So I have this function that sets a flag that stops the functionality that I have there at the end of adding multiple nodes. So like the nodes that are initialized as inside of a constructor of a class, they are added twice if I don't use add child external, and then it leaks memory there, and also there is other problems. They should use external. So the way that I'm doing this is every time I want to compose different classes, I use add child external. And when I want to create nodes that are part of other classes, I just use add child. So if you add children inside of the constructor, use add child. Outside of the constructor, use add child external. The thing is, I'm not really sure if I'm gonna test to see if it's gonna mess up if I run again. Or if I have to delete the whole thing and then run again. Yeah, but what I was saying is that there's three main things. One is the layout, the other one is the doc management system, and the other one is the classes. So what I'm thinking about is that maybe I don't even need to have different projects. I can just do like one main project, and then the main difference between scenes is just going to be the state of these three components. And the main difference between applications is just going to be more because of the fractal pattern. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do actually, because it's a lot less complex. Because if I do things like this, then I can just focus on the layouts. then have a good doc management system, and then I can do everything based on functions. And then, so I think the only question would be, because you have to synchronize the command line with the project. So the command line is going to run a specific project, so I have to synchronize each thing. But I think it doesn't change much. So the main difference would be that instead of putting the functionality here, I would create a generic functionality outside of here. Then the only thing that I would do in each project is just call the functions for each. Hmm. Trying to think if it is like possible to avoid writing this stuff here on each time. I think I have to, because I have to loop over the. And now it's better. Oh, I'm still doing the same thing, but it might be because of the other stuff. So what I'm gonna do is just delete and see if it works, because it might be because I didn't put add child external before, so the same stuff is leaking. Should be right. I think like I was saying before, the way that I did is like I generate this file on build time, and then I have the entry points based on projects. So I think for this I have to keep like this, because each project is gonna be different, obviously. Hmm. I'm trying to think if there is a way to not have to run, like, for example, one thing that I could do is just always use the same scene names, for example. But I think there's going to be variance because it depends, obviously. Yo, thank you, man, for the message. So it didn't do anything. Hmm. Or maybe it's changing another project. Could be layouts from code. Great test layouts. Yeah, this is very weird. There's something weird going on. So obviously what I can test is just comment the stuff that I put there and then see if it's gonna build. I'm pretty sure, because the last time that I did this, I was building the simple way there just to test other stuff. So I'm pretty sure that the part's not the problem. So it must be something we do with this stuff. Something to do with this stuff here. Drawer and not on the tree. Mm. So maybe I forgot. I'm adding GUI base here. This is weird. So it's complaining about the controller 0. This GUI base here. It's saying it's not on the tree. I'm returning the. That's the problem, I think. I'm returning the GUI base there. I think that's the issue. Let me see if we created something. Yeah, but it's one thing that is kind of annoying. I'm not really sure, but I'm pretty sure that there was a reason why it unlocked like this is that the condition that I'm doing here. So I think it makes more sense to try to find the node outside of this and then just check for the if the nodes exist on the sing roots. So basically move this condition to here and remove this one. So this one checks based on the cache of the names that I'm. So when I extract the sings, I cache the names on the hash set. And then here I'm checking to see if they already exist on the scene. So basically, if I set a name for the node, then I use the node name. If I don't, I have a pattern that I'm using to differentiate the nodes created from code, then the ones created from the editor. Then I check to see, I set the name for the child, which is the one that I'm trying to add, and I see if it exists on the scene based on this. So if it doesn't, it's either the roots or it's going to be a child. It's going to be external child, which is the node that was composed. So it's a node that wasn't created inside of the constructor of another node and is part of the scene. If that's the case, then based on the way, because I did breadth first search to add the nodes, it goes on the levels of the tree. So the children should always have a parent here. So I put this warning here because of that. So the thing that I'm doing is just moving the pointers. So I'm finding I pass the parent's name and then I try to find the parent's name on the tree and then I check to see if it exists. If it does, I remove the current parent. And then I add the child. Yeah, so it's basically giving the warning, I think, because I'm returning the GUI base and the GUI base is not on the roots. But that's kind of weird. Oh yeah, it's because no, that doesn't make sense actually. Hmm. So on the roots that I'm passing, there is the GUI base. Oh, I think it's because of the parent's name. So it's not gonna have in the beginning. It's not gonna have the parent on the tree because it didn't add the roots. So because no, actually on the GUI base it should be calling this, so it should be on the roots already. I think it's probably because of this, yeah. Because the way that I'm checking to see if it is the root or not is based on this condition. So roots of things don't have parents, and based on LLM's outputs, that seems to be the case. So whenever we have a node that it doesn't have a parents, it's probably the roots of the tree. Like, and you can be confident of that. That's why I did it like this. So I think this is the issue on the GUI basis. It is gonna have a parent, and then it's gonna add normally, and it's not gonna do this. Yeah, because then I'm not passing the endpoint, I'm passing the parent's name, which is not on the tree already. So so it's gonna hit here instead of going here on the GUI base, and then it doesn't find the parent tree node because the parent is not on the tree because I'm putting the wrong one. Hmm. Not sure if there's a better way to check for this. It's not putting anything because it's building the tree, but the root doesn't. It's not appended to the root of the tree. So I think it builds the subtree, but it doesn't append to the roots because there's no connection. I think that's what's happening. I'm not really sure. It's not me. Basically, what's happening is like this one is would be the GUI base, and then it's supposed to add as the roots. But then since this one has a parent, it's gonna go to the wrong place, and it's gonna try to find the parent on the tree. But because I didn't put the parents on the tree, because the root node is the one that already exists on the editor, so it's based on the what I created on the editor in the beginning, and like the node that already exists on the tree, on the scene tree. And then the roots that of the subtree that I'm gonna add to the editor is the thing that I'm creating here. So it's trying to add the GUI base to the root node, but the GUI base is a child of the node that is not part of the scene yet. So it can't find the node and then it complains, and then that's probably why it complains on the other ones as well. But yeah, so it's probably for this reason as well that I think it is transferring the nodes. Hmm. Like it's much more. So after this stuff, I think I'm going to spend a bunch of time thinking about whether or not it's worth to do the other thing that I just thought about. Like instead of doing things the way that I'm doing, there's probably a simpler way, I think, because it all comes down to main fundamental patterns. So the fundamental principles, you have the layouts, the doc manager, and the classes. And then all the possible scenes are going to be a finite state machine that are a composition of the different states that diverge or converge towards infinity, depending on the way you think about it. So just infinite finite state machines. So I think it makes more sense to create like generic classes and layouts. So like you create main layouts, then you create a doc manager class that's gonna take. Yeah, I think it doesn't matter that much to make the layouts should be dependent on specific names because there's probably not gonna be that many layouts should do. The variance of the layouts is probably low. And then what's gonna change is the components of the layouts. So the layout's the main structure, it's the archetypal structure of the GUI, and the classes are what holds the complexity. But you can either have classes or you can have composition inside. But it's just different levels of the same thing. The main difference is in the way that you view things on the editor. Because when you put nodes as children of another node, it doesn't show them on the inspector. When you put them, yeah, when you add them as a children of some node instead of the constructor of the nodes, unless yeah, but if I try to do something else, then it's gonna be too hard. So it basically doesn't show anything. Oh yeah, I put the graph on the wrong place. Oh no, I think it's on the correct place. It's on the. So let me see if this. It's not working. That's probably because it's showing the GUI. If I do this. So it's setting different values. Should probably. I think it's because I changed actually. It's doing this because of the way that I set up the thing here. So I'm just gonna comment out the control. So based on the control, I actually can change here. So I set the anchors there because I did that based on the same way that the editor does. So the editor creates this, the GUI base is a control, which is a panel, and they put the anchors for everything so it covers the whole screen. And then they build everything on top of that thing. But I think it's like overriding the other stuff. I can just like delete from here. It's probably the easiest thing to do. And I think the color is different because they changed on the source code there. It's still not working. Now this is kind of weird. I think the environment is working. I can just see. Maybe it's because I don't have a camera. That's why it's not working. I've tried the camera. Yeah, now it works. So I think it's the same thing. And the colors are different just because I changed on the source code there. Nice. So I'm gonna change this stuff off stream. I'm gonna move to a class. But now I'm thinking a lot more about the other stuff because I think it makes more sense. Like the other option that I can do is just change the source code from the editor setup as well, or from the engine setup. I did think about this before. So basically the way that it works on the editor is that the editor is different than what I'm doing because the editor initializes as a part of the engine based on the command lines in the way I think I'm not really I think the way you build doesn't matter. You don't the build only matters for different like if you want different operational systems or different compilers or stuff like that. But depending on the way you run the executable, the arguments you pass, I think yeah, it's probably the arguments you pass there is going to run the editor. So on the main setup, there is a functionality that they use to parse their arguments, and then if, based on the parsing is the way that they decide whether or not to. I guess it is based on the build system as well. So depending on the way, yeah. So you have different ways as well to build. So the arguments you use to build also matter. Share the arguments that I'm using there, because they set up macros on the build system as well. And obviously this is very good because then if you build for because the exported version of the game is just the engine itself, the engine executable, and the main difference is that they use these macros to. If you're doing the build for the editor, the macro is going to be true. Then they add a bunch of code that is related to the editor. If you do the build for the engine, then the macro is false, and then it just removes all the code related to the editor. And then it allows you to use that executable as the one that you put the resources of your game when you're exporting as part of the executable. So they have some functionality that allows them to manually write to the executable file, and they use a program from Windows if you're building for Windows. that allows them to put, I think, metadata or like other information on the executable that allows you to have the final thing on the executable. So it's both on the build system, the build time, and on the when you execute, is going to change. Yeah, so if you put target equals editor, then it's gonna be you're gonna build the executable for the editor. But then inside of one of these, like somewhere here, they have some functionality to parse command line arguments, and then based on the command line arguments, they're going to change the state, and then they're going to decide whether or not to create the root node of the editor, or if they're going to create the engine and then find the resources for the thing, and they use Globus. Globus is the name that they choose there for the project settings singleton. Project settings is the class that they use to manage the settings of the project, like the name says, and they write the stuff on the project settings folder or file. No, the project.godot file that is on the root of the project directory. So based on that file, they change the state of the project settings, then they use the project settings setup function to see if the current like runtime has the information for the game. I think that they either search on the executable you're running to see if it has, or they search on the roots of the project, I think, to see if you have the .package file. It's basically this file that keeps track of the state of the settings on the project. I think there's somewhere. So like one thing that I was thinking about doing, but I think here is the part that they parse the arguments. Yeah, pretty sure. And the tools enable is gonna be the thing that is related to the editor. Pretty sure. And they have on the build system as well. Yes, here. Yeah, so if you do the editor builds, then it's gonna append the CPP defines is what allows scones to define the macros, I think. So the env-base is the environments, and then is adding the tools, defining the tools base, tools enabled. And this is going to be true when you pass targets, which is the value that you pass here, equal to editor. I think you put platform, I think. Or maybe you don't put anything. I think it's target equal platform if you want to build the executable for your final game. Probably. So based on the arguments here, and at some point they're gonna choose whether or not they're either gonna build the nodes, the root node of the editor, or they're going to do some other stuff, which would be for running the game. So what I was thinking about doing is just change the code here, because I just did it the way that I did there to not worry about this stuff. But maybe if I do things this way, it's gonna be a lot easier. So maybe it's worth it. Because then what I'm thinking about doing is like, instead of creating stuff based on projects, I can just change the data and have like a generic way to can arbitrarily choose the line that I want to put each thing. So for example, you can imagine that you have like this, you can reuse the same thing for different applications, for example. Because everything's gonna be the same thing. So just different pathways of exploration. The way that I'm thinking about now is that the GUI is gonna be like it's like a portal to, like hidden inside of the GUI, there is a tree data structure. So there's a finite state machine actually. So each tree is going to be a scene. The collection of the navigations of scenes are a finite state machine. So the scope of the application is the path of travel on the finite state machine. And that's mainly what's going to differentiate different projects. So you're just basically changing the scope of the finite state machine. So if you focus on the fundamental parts, it would be a lot better, I think. It's like easier to compose. And then it reduces the complexity that I have there. Because I can change, so what I can do is change the arguments on the command line, maybe. And instead of doing the things that I'm doing there, I just change the logic, the way that they are initializing the engine, and then I just run. But the issue with doing this, I think that another reason why I did the way that I did is because it is nice to be able to use the editor to debug. But I guess I can change based on the arguments that I pass. Hmm. Because mainly when you're using the editor, then the code doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is saving everything. Like it could be completely independent. The only thing that is more convenient to make it as a part of the engine because then you don't have to think about the build system. But it's completely independent. You just like serialization. I'll be right back. Like one of the annoying things about doing things like this, if I add other functionality here and then just return. Then I would have to think about like what happens after the setup, which depends on the operational system. Because the main function is the same for, as far as I know right now, is the same for all the operational system builds. But the thing that changes is the thing that is gonna call the main. So I can just return. I can't just return. I think. I think now on Windows is gonna call from here. So it calls main setup here, and then it's gonna return there. So it's still gonna run the other stuff anyway. Unless I put a condition, I guess. I could put a condition. So basically just move instead of doing the way that I'm doing there. True. Hmm. But I think it's not completely related to the other stuff that I was talking about as well. Because the other stuff is more... this is basically what I put here. No, I think this one already existed. Was somewhere else that I put. Not sure if it's worth. Like, the thing is, I do think it's worth thinking about this because obviously I want to reduce complexity as much as possible. Like, and it's better to try to do this before doing. The more stuff we do, the harder it becomes to reduce complexity because things build on top of each other. So before I start doing a bunch of projects, I think it's worth it to think about this. But it is kind of difficult to think about it. Yes. I think I should leave this part as it is because it's gonna be annoying. It doesn't matter that much. Maybe the only thing that I should try to do is just move to the beginning of the iteration instead of the end. But what I should focus on doing, though, I want to see if I can avoid. Maybe I should see if I can remove the path. Because it is kind of annoying to have to put the whole path here. So maybe this is worth trying to do. But I think that that's how Godot is gonna find the project settings. Because what I'm thinking about is that, like, instead of creating a bunch of projects, it makes a lot more sense to create scenes and then compose the scenes, and then the boundaries of projects is going to be arbitrary. So obviously each scene depends on each other because it is a finite state machine. So like but you can think about the scene independence of the pathway of travel between scene and scene. So the change scene functionality can be based on the context, and the scene can be the same. So it just changes the way you change each thing. Like you can recompose the trees into different finite state machines by changing the path. So like I think it's more effective. But the biggest problem with this is that it's based on the way that they structure this. Which does make sense, I think. Because here the problem is, and also I put this stuff here. So, and there's also the problem with the assets. But if I could create like a generic folder, like instead of developing each project separately, but that doesn't make sense. And this is the issue, they put everything on based on the path. So maybe if I study the functionality that they use on the project manager to create a project in the beginning based on the path. I'm not sure if that's a waste of time or not. So what I'm thinking, like, the way that it is now, you build each project separately. And what I'm thinking about doing is like create a generator of scenes instead. So turn the engine into a generator of scenes and then put the scenes whatever I want. And then just like change the project settings based on the C++ code. So put everything on C++, like the stuff that they do on the files, I can do it on C++. And then it makes it a lot easier instead of having to create a whole different folder. I just create different functions to have different settings for each thing. But I'm not really sure if it's worth it, the return on investment on my time. Because I don't know how hard it's going to be to keep the functionality the same when it comes to the editor and this stuff here. But if I did it like this, then I think it would scale a lot better. Because then I can think about the engine as a generator of yeah, but then like the problem is that the editor would rely on the path, I think. Think about the engine as a generator of things. The biggest problem is the editor. The question is how to Is the editor design is having in mind that you're gonna open the project and the project is gonna be on a specific folder. So instead of doing that, I could have always the same folder. Let me think of this. Like the question is like, how can I do this? The two things, like maintain the things that's the way that it is. I think probably this way is just to add another variable maybe. I think the question is how to run without passing the path. Like instead of doing the way that I'm doing now, where I run based on the project path, I just run a generic like version. And then I don't need to do the distinction between projects. I just compose the code depending on whatever function I want to run. So like essentially this part here of the headless, it wouldn't be to create a specific project. It would be to create things and then to create resources basically. So you use the engine to create resources and then you compose the resources manually because it's a lot easier. So like if you have like you only have to create a scene once and then you can reuse it on any project. So it makes a lot more sense to create like core assets and then just the only functionality that would change is the transition between things and the data that changes the states of the classes. So it scales based on the layouts and the complexity of the classes. And it makes a lot more sense. So maybe I think the easiest thing to do is to leave the way that it is here and then just add another add another, or maybe the ones that I already have there, or change the functionality. So what would be the main difference? That's the question. I think I have to find the breakpoints. So the main state that you change is the engine or add functionality. What can I do it? So the question is what happens if you don't pass the path. Let's see what happens. Interesting. So what I can do is put this on the debugger. And that's what I'm gonna do. I think before I do the other stuff, that makes a lot more sense. So what I'm thinking about doing is instead of doing the way that I'm doing now, I just add other like instead of creating the code based on projects, I create the code based on scene generation. And then the way that I use the editor to manipulate the scenes is going to be in the same way that you usually do it. You just create a project and then I put the scenes on the project. Or the question is if I want to change from the code. That makes sense. But I guess I can use the I can use the classes from Godot to find the projects as well. That would be an option, but then maybe that fits the points. Yeah. On the path is gonna mess up. It doesn't show. Hmm. So the question is, if I do based on scenes instead of projects, then how do I update? How do I change the scene? And the question is whether or not I do think that it is necessary probably because it's a loop. So like it makes sense to build from code, then sometimes change the state from the editor, and then try to pick up from that state. But maybe it doesn't actually. Maybe if that's the case, you should just encapsulate on a class. Hmm. But I think it's worth trying to do what I'm thinking about doing. Maybe I should create another command line argument should not mess up the one that I have there already. So what I'm thinking about doing is creating a folder with like the main like or manually creating the settings. So you manually either manually create the settings for the project, or maybe you don't need it. Maybe you don't need the settings actually. It's like the main thing that matters is the layouts, the doc manager, and the classes, I think. So if I could remove everything else and just focus on the building, the composing classes with layouts, and the doc manager would be the same probably. So it's mainly layouts and classes. Hmm. But I think for the visualization, you probably would need a composition instead of a class. It's gonna be very complex. But even the composition, you're just like adding functions. So. I could create another like folder. So basically create only one main project, which the purpose of the project is to generate the data. I think that makes a lot more sense. Then like you have the generation of the data. The main problem is the editor. How do you think about the editor though? Because it is very useful to be able to use the editor sometimes. Like the editor would have to be like a generic tool. But it isn't. That's. Oh. So the question is, how do you update the code after the editor? But maybe it's not that big of a deal. No, but yeah, this is the thing. I think I'm gonna stop streaming now, and I'm gonna think about this because I do think that this is probably a better direction to go with. Yeah, I have to think about this. So I'm gonna stop here, and I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna think about this. I might do this before I study the other stuff. So I'm gonna see if I do decide to do this, I'm probably gonna change the. So I'm gonna change the way that I'm doing things. Instead of running the stuff that I'm running there now, I'm going to create a generic. It's probably gonna be inside of the Godot folder because it's easier to think about. So like scene generation folder, and then either I can change the code to find the project settings based on some name or something inside of the folder. So I can have the folder that is the main folder entry point that is going to have all the functionality. And I have another subfolder of that folder that contains different project settings that I want to use. Just copy from a project and then change the code so that I can use those settings instead of the free routes based on the path. So I have to understand how the logic for running works based on the path. So probably what I'm gonna do, I have to search where does it use path and then put breakpoints. Which I think I already looked into it a little bit. And it's gonna be on this function that uses the path. And this is gonna be the path of the project. So so if I do it like this, then I think that it comes down to how much, because the more that I think about it, like how often are you going to change the scene from the editor and then update the code from the scene? Because if you do that, like essentially, like regardless of which path you take, the frequency is always going to be the same. So like if you change a lot the scene, you start the scene from code, for example, and then you change a lot the scene from the editor, and then you go back and you update the code to reflect. You're going to be doing this either way, either approach. So the frequency is the same. So if I separate, it makes more sense because it's simpler. So every time that I change, either I create some extra logic that allows me to put data, to change the states, put different states based on the variance of data, or to create different classes and functions to uh, encapsulate the new states and then just increases the database. And I think that is a lot simpler to do like that because then you don't have to think about like creating a different project each time. It's more about creating assets and then thinking about the projects later. So like I said before, I can think about the application as a finite state machine, and then the GUI as a tree, which is the sync tree, and then I leave the connection between them as open, and then I do this depending on the situation. Another question is like how can I structure the data for different components, data from outside. me structure it there. I think it has to be part of the node anyway. Like, you can make based on the state of classes. So what matters is the state of the class that you cache to the scene. That's how you're gonna be able to translate into different runtimes. So like from the code that creates the scene generation, you build, uh, you create functionality outside of the scope of the classes that can change the data. And then the thing that is actually saved to the scene depends on the structure of the class. But I think either way doesn't matter that much. I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna think about this. So I'm probably gonna do this. I'm going to change instead of doing the way that I'm doing, I'm gonna create like one main thing that is just generating scenes. And then from the editor's perspective, I'm going to do it manually. So I'm going to do it from the executable on the editor, and then I'm gonna build the code independent from the editor. And if it gets annoying, I can think about a way to update the project based on the code as well. Yeah, so see you next time.